Got it?
Yep.
Thumbnail, title, I think it was pretty self-explanatory. This is a really, really cheap plastic toy camera that I found from my buddy ABC Collectibles. Definitely go check him out on Instagram. I've bought quite a few things from him, and all of his stuff is super top-notch, high-quality, vintage camera gear. You can get lenses, you can get cameras. I got a Super 8 camera from him. This isn't sponsored in any way. I paid for this camera with my own money. I'm just shouting him out because I buy stuff from him all the time. I'm buying an FD lens from him very soon as well. He's just a really nice person, and he has some really cool stuff up for sale. Essentially what happened was I was on Instagram and I saw his post come up, and I was looking at some of the stuff that he had on his website, and this Crayola camera really caught my eye for obvious reasons. I absolutely love how this camera looks. It is my entire aesthetic distilled into a camera. I love the yellow, I love the retro green accents, I love the font on it. Everything about it for me was just like, I don't care if this thing takes the worst pictures in the world, it just looks really cool. And in the back of my mind, I was mostly thinking this thing will just be cool for flat lay props and just it's gonna look good on my shelf. Now, I can't find much information or the history of this camera. From common sense, I would probably say it was made sometime in the 90s, maybe even the early 2000s. I believe it is a Vivitar camera that is just rebranded for Crayola. Which model, I'm not entirely sure, and there's some people saying it's this model, but I'm not entirely sure which one it is. At the end of the day, it's just a cheap plastic 35mm film camera. So some features and specs of this camera: the lens, no clue. It's plastic, of course. It has a nice little lens cover on it, but I couldn't tell you the aperture on it. I can't even really tell you the shutter speed of this camera. From my own testing, I want to say it's probably like 1/250th of a shutter, maybe even slower. If you do some fast motion stuff, it's really not going to catch that motion too well. You will start to see a little bit of motion blur, so it is something you really want to kind of stay pretty stable with while you're shooting. That being said, I have done some samples where I shot from the hip and I wasn't looking at anything, and I just wanted to see if I could capture stuff in still motion. But as you can see, if you zoom in, there is just a tad little bit of motion blur, but it is a relatively fast camera, which also means in low light it won't be great at all. I mean, you could probably shoot ISO 800 film on this or higher, whatever you want, but just remember that this is not a low light camera. I couldn't tell you its aperture, so it's really a daylight, sunlight kind of camera. And again, treat it as like a disposable and it should do just fine. This is also a manual wind camera, which means when you're done with your film, you got to sit there and manually wind up the film back into the reel, which not the end of the world. It's kind of fun. It's kind of part of the experience. It reminds me of a manual wound watch where you got to sit there and set your dates and set your time or whatever. Camera also has a built-in flash, which takes 2 AA batteries, and on mine, it's completely functional. You can hear the nice charging sound when it turns on. I didn't even think about how this thing had a flash when I shot this roll of film with it, and honestly, I didn't test any of the flash shots. I just know it has a flash and the flash works. So I imagine if you wanted to use it as like a party snapshot type of camera, this would be a fun little one to bring out at a party, and everyone would be like, yo, look at this guy with the Crayola. No one would ever do that because that is the dumbest fucking thing of all time. If you want to be the life of the party, you can bring that Crayola and literally never get invited to that person's place again. In terms of price point, these things kind of pop up around the $50 range, which isn't exceptionally cheap, but it's not overly expensive either. I think the fact is they're just kind of rare and they're hard to find, and that's why the price is what it is. Do I think the camera is potentially worth more? Absolutely not, and I would not pay more than $50 for this camera, but for the price, and when you'll see the images that have come out of it, I do think it's kind of actually worth it for the money. I would maybe probably say it's probably worth like 40 bucks. If you can find it in that range, that is a stellar deal for this camera, but that's the kind of going rate right now. It's like 50, sometimes even 60 bucks. The camera came with an original carrying case from what I can gather, and mine came with this original case. And so the cool thing about this is I just attached it to the belt loop of my pants, and anytime I wanted to use the camera, I just pulled it out of this little case and it was ready to go. Honestly, they always say the best camera is the camera you have on you, and this is one of those cameras where it looks dope when it's on you while you have it on you, and it's, what am I saying? I love it when the sun comes in and I'm probably overexposed right now. Now, because this camera really doesn't have any more specs to talk about, I just want to show you what this camera is capable of. And I had very low expectations for this camera. I thought everything was going to either be underexposed or overexposed, or it was going to be soft and blurry or just full of film burn, light leaks, whatever. Honestly, I just had no expectations of this camera doing well. But that being said, I did put a roll of Portra 400 in, which we know is not cheap or crappy film. This is a nice roll of film that I put in this camera. And I just kind of threw caution to the wind and hoped for the best. But without further ado, here are my shots with the Crayola 35mm Sport camera. Look, here's the thing in general about film. I have nice film cameras, and what I've found is when I use my nice, expensive, or fancy modern film cameras, I end up shooting very similar images to what I would shoot on a mirrorless camera or even my phone for that matter. And so what's interesting about having a crappy camera or having a bad film camera is you're getting all the nostalgia and the novelty of shooting film, but it really feels that way too. It's kind of the same thing we talk about with Fuji cameras. The shooting experience is going to lend your creative eye to new possibilities and ways of shooting that you typically would not do with a modern camera. And so for me, film kind of fell out of flavor for myself. Flavor? What am I, Guy Fieri? For a while there, I felt like film just wasn't interesting to me anymore. Because I got Fuji cameras, because I got pretty good at color grading and editing in post, I was not really seeing the benefit of shooting film. It's expensive, it takes forever, you don't see what you shot, and so the whole novelty of it kind of wore off. Whereas when I've shot with this Crayola camera, that fun, that like spark of what it feels like to have a silly little camera and you don't know what you're gonna get and you really think it might not turn out, like that's exciting to me. And I think these shots that I shot with this camera are some of the better shots that I've shot in the last little while, and I'm excited to shoot more with it. And so for a $50 little point and shoot that looks pretty damn cool when it's on your shelf, I can highly recommend this Crayola camera. The fact that you can probably find one of these for under 50 bucks, please do not drive the price up because of this video, because this has happened to me with Fuji cameras, so I'll be really upset if these things start becoming like $100 or whatever. This camera is not worth more than $50 for the nostalgia or for the looks of it, or especially not for what it's capable of, so do not pay more than $50 for this camera. But if you can find one in good condition, it's a lot of fun to have, and it really looks cool on the shelf with all your other stuff. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you want to see some more film stuff on the channel, because I did order some more film stuff, so regardless, I'll probably do some more videos on it. Otherwise, my name is Patrick Tommaso. This has been another video. I hope you enjoyed it. Otherwise, you'll see me next time I feel like making a video. Have you noticed this weird trend of people holding these Zoom microphones like in frame like this? Like all you have to do is just bring it down here. Like it doesn't have to be in the frame of your video. It still sounds good. You don't have to have it up here. Yeah, proximity sounds great, whatever. But down here, still sounds pretty good.